My sister, Sophie, works at Venetrix, where I did a little work experience stint, and I did really enjoy it, to be fair. And I could see that she was making so much money. And I was like, do you know what? I want to be doing a little bit of that. So I basically just asked Soph, I was like, look, I need to be in a job where I'm earning money. I was living at home at the time as well, and I kind of wanted to move out of home. Always liked the idea of Manchester. She had an assessment day for G2, so I was like, perfect. Basically got on the assessment day, said exactly what she told me to say, added my own little spin onto it, got the job, and that's how it all began.
Did she make commission on placing you?
She did, and I don't think I ever saw any of it, actually. That's a good point.
Shameful.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say very difficult. Was being very direct, was talking over me, was asking me questions about pricing and all this stuff that we didn't talk about as SDRs on the initial call. You know, that's not what we did. The whole point of an inbound was to qualify it and set that expectation at the beginning of the call. And I remember her just being quite rude, and I was getting really anxious, stressed on the call. We were on a Zoom. I had to turn my camera off because I started crying on the call because I was like, I cannot handle this.
So in that low moment, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being everything's brilliant, I'm loving life, 1 being I just want to go back to that garden and never have to do this again, how low were you? Hello and welcome to another episode of I Used to Be Crap at Sales. I'm your host, Mark Akers, and today I am joined by an account executive at Deal with previous experience in the SaaS world, including an SDR and AE role at G2, a LinkedIn influencer and social seller with, at the time of filming, 25,361 followers, someone who loves a LinkedIn selfie and quite frankly is the most travelled sales professional I've ever seen. If you've not guessed it by now, I'm joined by Holly Allen. Holly, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the Orange Chairs. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited to be here.
Fantastic. Let's get into the podcast with a one yes/no question. Holly, did you used to be crap at sales?
Yes.
Let's dive into it. Holly, tell us, where did you learn to sell? Looking at your LinkedIn, I'm not sure where you started in sales, in the sense of the first role you have down is a hostess for bittersweet promotion companies, but it says you were commission-based. So I don't know if you would say it was that, or I know you did a couple of weeks with a recruitment company, Venetrix, but then there was G2. When I ask you, where did you learn to sell? Where would you say?
So it was at that very first role, bittersweet promotion. So to give you a bit of background on what that was, I was at uni. At uni, I was a real party girl, which is a bit of a shock for me now because I'm such a hermit now. But back at uni, I was a real party girl. I was going out 6 times a week and would see my bank balance very quickly getting worse and worse. And I was like, I don't want to be one of those, broke students that can't do anything. So I got a job as a shop girl with this promotion company called Bittersweet Promotion, because I could kind of combine the best of both worlds, where I could still go out, I could still have fun, but I was earning money at the same time. It was a commission-based role, so obviously the more shots you sold, the more money that you would make. And I absolutely loved it. It was my first ever proper job, and I had so much fun doing it. It was all cash in hand at the time that I started, and I used to carry a light up tray and a bum bag where I would put all my money in. And I used to get in from various different nightclubs all over the country. And I would get in at 6 a.m. sometimes, and I would literally sit there on my bed and just count the money that I'd earned, and I would get such a thrill from it. And then first thing on a Monday morning, I would go into the bank to pay that into my account, and I just loved the feeling of making my own money. And every week I would try and make more and more and more. So that was definitely where it began. And I think just realizing that, I had to use my personality, I had to be quite confident, really put myself out there, and that would mean that I would make more and more money. So yeah, I would say that's kind of where it all began.
That is not what I was expecting. This kind of shows how my brain works. I heard bittersweet and I just thought it was like brownies or cookies or
Oh no,
I wasn't
it was
thinking
Jaeger bombs.
right, okay. So like yeah, you're a shot girl, so to speak. So how much money were you making per night?
So when I started, it was like 40, 50 quid. And as I got better, within about kind of 2 months, I was taking home anywhere between, I think my best night was like £750. And a kind of average was like 300 to 600 a night.
That is crazy.
Honestly, it was unbelievable.
So what did you do? Like how did you go from 50 to 750? Like what were you doing differently?
Well, there were some ways to be clever with it, but
Given the wrong change back.
essentially it was just like I would get to the shift, you know, if I knew that the bar wherever I was working opened at 5, but my shift was meant to start at 7, I would get there at 5. Like I would make sure I was there. You know, they didn't have checks on that didn't really matter. And then I would stay until the very last minute. You know, I wouldn't really take a break. I was on my feet all night. I think the more I got into it, the more I would make.
I'm wondering why you're not doing this now.
Honestly, sometimes when sales gets tough, I do think, God, do I just go back to my shot girl days? It was honestly unbelievable money. It was crazy.
I bet. And I don't know this, but I can imagine one of the skills you would have picked up is communication. Like speaking to different people, different levels of intoxication, shall we say, and probably having to adapt to, well, first of all, how old are they? Are they male or female? That I guess now would be a different engagement.
Yeah.
Are they younger? Are they older? How drunk are they? And you've kind of got to think on your feet how you change, how you speak to those people, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. That was a massive part of it. You know, if you've got a hen do, for example, the way that you approach them, the tone that you take, the words that you use is going to be very different when you go up to a group of lads on a stag do. So, yeah, that was super key. And I think as well, just, you know, often I would go up to, not to stereotype, but like guys that might be out with their girlfriends, and the girlfriends would immediately be like, no, absolutely not. We don't want any shots. And just having to deal with that, you know, rejection, take it on the chin, go to the next person, try again.
Okay, so I can see that gave you good footing, but I'm guessing whilst that's selling, it just cannot be compared to what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that first role then. So when I looked at your CV and go through that, as I say, your first SDR role was at G2.
Yes.
How did that come about? And before you answer, I suppose, here's what I want to know, right? Mm-hmm. No one wants to be in sales. No one's growing up wanting to be in sales. They want to be pop stars or whatever. They're at uni. You're not thinking about getting a job as an SDR. Yeah. How did you get that first job as an SDR? Like, what made you take that role?
So when I was at Bittersweet, obviously was making really good money. When I first came out of uni, I actually did a manager in training at Hollister. So I was working in the retail space. I lasted about 3 weeks. Absolutely hated it. It was like, this is not for me.
Is this the clothes shop that's really dark and you can't see anything?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it was.
It's not for me.
Yeah, no, it was just, I realised I love to go in there to shop, but yeah, not for me. So anyway, and I also missed the commission element. Like I loved the part of dealing with customers, but I really missed that commission element. My sister, Sophie, works at Venetrix, where I did a little work experience stint, and I did really enjoy it, to be fair. And I could see that she was making so much money. And I was like, do you know what? I want to be doing a little bit of that. So I basically just asked Soph, I was like, look, I need to be in a job where I'm earning money. I was living at home at the time as well, and I kind of wanted to move out of home. Always liked the idea of Manchester. She had an assessment day for G2. So I was like, perfect. Basically got on the assessment day, said exactly what she told me to say, added my own little spin onto it, got the job, and that's how it all began.
Did she make commission on placing you?
She did, and I don't think I ever saw any of it, actually. That's a good point.
Shameful.
Yeah, well.
Missed the trick there, though, because she could have placed you multiple times. It could have been a little scam going on. So it was a conscious decision then to get into sales, because I suppose your taste for money and commission from the shot days, but did you really know what you were signing up for?
I didn't know what I was signing up for, and I think I just didn't really know what else to do. You know, when I started at Hollister, I thought I was going to be the CEO of Hollister, California. That was the plan. And then that dream, you know, died very quickly. And I was just like, well, I need a job. And I just turned to, you know, my immediate family. My sister's a recruiter, so it was kind of a no-brainer. All right, SaaS sales it is. Didn't know what SaaS was. Didn't really, honestly, did not even really know what G2 was, even on the assessment day, until I kind of really was probably about 3 months in. Did I understand? Right, review platform, okay.
But again, why not go into recruitment? Your sister does that. She could talk you through that. That makes sense. She had a bit of experience of Venetrix. SaaS sales, like, just such a big jump, isn't it? Like, what stopped you going into other fields like recruitment?
So I did initially get a job in recruitment. That helped me move to Manchester. So I was at a company working in recruitment, absolutely loved it, but then COVID hit and I was put on furlough. I didn't work for a good couple of months, and my sister had come home at the time, so we were both at home in my mum and dad's house. I was sunbathing in the garden every day while she was still placing people into these SDR roles, and it got to a point where I was like, I can't do this furlough life anymore. She's placing people on basic salaries at the time that were, you know, really big to me, because obviously basics in sales are typically better than basics in recruitment, and I was just like, I want to be doing this as well. So yeah, made the jump.
Fair enough. So we were an SDR at G2, and then you got promoted there, didn't you? What role did you get promoted into?
Account executive.
And I know the answers, but I want to hear it from you. What was the time period where you're an SDR to an account executive? How long were you an SDR for?
So 15 months as an SDR, and then I did 3 months as an AE at G2.
Do you feel like that was enough time as an SDR before moving into an AE role?
Honestly, no. At the time, couldn't wait to move up. With hindsight, I think for me personally, I could have probably done with another minimum 6 months, I would say, maybe even another year in the SDR gig.
So talk me through what happened then. Like, how did that come about? Did you push for it? Did you get given it? How did you go from being an SDR with no other previous experience as an SDR?
Yeah.
So you've been in SaaS sales for 15 months.
Yeah.
Really not a long time at all. How did you get the AE role? How did that come about?
So I did the classic thing where you start as an SDR and immediately you're like, I want to be an AE. How do I get to be an AE? Because that is kind of what we're told that you should do and you should move on to do, and you should try and do it quickly. So I did that, and had, you know, the interview at that kind of 14-month mark, was really, really excited about moving up. And this is why I do think it is definitely dependent on the individual, because I'd moved up with the SDR that I'd joined with. You know, we started on the same day, we moved up at the same time, and he was definitely ready for it. You know, he's still there now, absolutely crushing it. But I just wasn't. But I think I kind of felt like I had to move up. And I think that's why I only lasted 3 months, because I got into the role, I completely panicked. I had some personal stuff going on as well. I was living in London, hated living in London, really wanted to move back up north. So that was a big factor. I think if you're not happy with your environment, you know, that makes sales, any job, very difficult. Moved into the AE role, had a mad panic, and, you know, kind of with hindsight, I really wish I'd have stuck it out and spent longer in that role. I really do. But I think just kind of lack of maturity, I jumped into another role that was
From G2,
yeah, that was doing like SDR coaching. And I think the reason I did that was because, you know, I didn't want to go back to an SDR. My God, how could I possibly do that? Like, how embarrassing would that be in my head? And so I thought, well, SDR coaching, I still get to go back to that world, but technically I'm a coach, so it's better than being an SDR. Yeah.
So there's quite a lot we could break down there, and I kind of want to come back to that, because one of the things that I see all the time is SDRs wanting that next step, like way quicker than what they're ready for it.
Yeah.
And I've seen SDRs leave good companies to get the AE role that they can't get internally and then fail. And I think there is, I mean, I think I was an SDR for nearly 3 years. I wasn't called it back then. Like the title didn't even exist. I was a business development executive,
Right.
which is just like a stupid title that I was given because that world did not exist. But
Yeah.
did that for like 3 years, just cold calling, picking up the phone, fine tune that craft before I moved up. And even then I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
You know. So we're then in a sales coaching management role, is that right?
Yeah, you could call it that.
And how many sort of SDRs were you looking after?
So I was looking after, good question. I think the team grew to about 6.
So that sounds like a part of your career where you just really didn't know what you wanted to do. We moved on from there, and we'll come back to like different parts and where you learned that, but we then moved on to there, and we now find you a deal.
Yeah.
And you went into that SDR role.
Mm-hmm.
But 6 months before, how could I do that? That's embarrassing. How did you shift mentality to take that SDR role?
Yeah, and this is the kind of ironic thing, isn't it? Where when I was at G2, it was like, well, I have to move into an AE role now because everyone's going to be going, well, so-and-so moved up. She's obviously not as good. And then I actually came back to the SDR role, a year or year and a half later. I think I just realised, look, I really wanted to join Deal. It was an amazing company back then, is an amazing company now. And I knew that if I want to actually do well at this company, I need to put my pride aside. I need to go in. I need to learn the ropes. I need to start, not from the bottom, because I don't think saying that about an SDR role is fair, but I need to start from the beginning because I want to move into an AE role eventually, but I need to be ready. I need to know everything that I need to know to make a success out of that. So it was very much a pride aside. I remember the day before I joined Deal being so nervous about the post of I've gone from head of sales development, that was my job title on LinkedIn, to SDR. I was like, oh my God, those feelings came back. This is so embarrassing, blah, blah, blah. But then I was like, and we talked about this earlier, like no one cares. No one actually cares. Like it's all in your head. And I just think something I've really learned is like, if you're not happy in a job, you shouldn't stay for, a big salary or a job title or because you care about what other people think. If you need to take a step back, that is completely fine to do so. And it's genuinely the best thing I could have ever done. And I'm so glad that I did. So I did 10 months as an SDR at Deal before being promoted. And I'm so, so glad I did that and didn't, walk into the interview and say, I want to be an AE.
And again, I'd love to dive into like that head trash, that impostor syndrome, that fear of what other people would think. And I imagine that gets heightened when you have a brand like yours on LinkedIn that can get into your head about perception and what people think, etc. I'd love to get into that a little bit more, but just I suppose to finish the story, you then got promoted to an AE at Deal. How long have you been in that role for now? Is it 6 months?
6 months.
How's it gone?
It's hard. It is hard. On the whole, I'm really enjoying it. I really, really am. And I know that I can't wait for 6 months' time when I look back on where I am today and I'm like, okay, I've massively improved from where I was. But it is difficult. And I think it really does just go to show, I've been an SDR at 2 different companies, 15 months at one, 10 months at the other. I think the longer that you can be an SDR for, I honestly think is a gift because the skills that you learn, the time that you have in that role are so, so crucial, I think, to support you moving up to AE, but also to understand that just because you are a successful SDR does not mean you're going to walk into an AE role and smash it, because that has certainly not been the case for me. I'm not doing badly, but it's tough. It is tough.
What are the hardest parts of the role for you today?
I would say, there's a lot of things, right? I think firstly, it's all of the additional skills that you need to learn around, negotiation, having those very difficult conversations with prospects when you're trying to close a deal and they want a better price, or what about your competitors, or whatever it might be. And I'm not naturally a confrontational person at all. I hate those conversations. So even when I'm on a call, and it's funny, I was speaking to my manager about this and I was saying, but when someone asks me about a competitor that really stresses me out, and he was like, but that's not even confrontation, Holly. They're just asking a question. But I get really nervous in those moments. So I think that's definitely part of it. And I think as well, you know, we're told in sales, you have to be resilient, you have to have a thick skin. And I think as an SDR, you know, you definitely have to. You're making cold calls, you're getting the phone put down on you. But I think with something that I've struggled with is, you know, you build great relationships with these potential customers. You have several calls with them and then suddenly they ghost you, or suddenly, oh no, we don't want to move forward. And I take that really personally. You know, it's not only what could I have done better in my sales strategy, but I'm like, did they not like me? Did I not come across well? And I will think about it, and I've shed a few tears over it, and I just take it really to heart. And I think that is something that, you know, I'm going to need to work on, because you have to accept that you are going to have a lot of rejection, and that is going to happen a lot of the time. And it's not, you know, it might be to do with you, but 9 times out of 10, it's not. It's not a personal thing.
There's so much I want to ask there.
Okay.
And it's like, how do we dice this up? Because let me tell what's going through my mind. So I want to know how long you think someone should be an SDR for. I want to know about conflict, and is that really in your head? Because when I hear I hear your manager there saying, you know, tell about your competitors, talk about pride, I don't feel that's conflict.
I know.
But I want to get into why you feel like there's conflict.
Yeah.
My ears always prick up when I hear an AE talk about relationships and needing to be liked, and that, because that's a huge thing that people struggle with, is that need for approval. I'd love to understand that for you, and like in a way where I just totally understand it. Like I've gone on that journey myself, you know, and had that pointed out to me. And then just how hard you found the role, when you talk about time where you've shed tears, and influence from managers and how they've helped you. There's loads we can get into. I suppose that kind of brings the summary of your career so far to date. I mean, and it is such a short career so far. Like talking about how you were in the garden during COVID to where you got to now. I mean,
It's been a whirlwind.
But in a way, it's incredible what you've achieved in such a short period of time. But you've got so much more ahead of you, I suppose, which is obviously really exciting. When you said at the start and introduced yourself, you know, hi, I'm Holly and I used to be crap at sales. There'd have been a point of your career that was at the top of your mind. What point was that?
Yeah, so that point was, and this, I don't think I'll ever forget this memory. I was an SDR at G2. I had received an inbound call. I had it in my calendar. I was in the office. I can literally remember it like it was yesterday. In the office in Borough. No one else was in the office. I was doing this call, and the prospect that I had was, I think it's fair to say, very difficult. Was being very direct, was talking over me, was asking me questions about pricing and all this stuff that we didn't talk about as SDRs on the initial call. You know, that's not what we did. The whole point of an inbound was to qualify it and set that expectation at the beginning of the call. And I remember her just being quite rude, and I was getting really anxious, stressed on the call. We were on a Zoom. I had to turn my camera off because I started crying on the call because I was like, I cannot handle this. And it was really awkward, and I had to send her an email after and say, sorry, my internet cut out. And it was honestly horrific. And I remember ending the call and then FaceTiming my mum straight after, bawling my eyes out. Mum, I can't do this. It's so hard. Everyone's horrible. I don't like it. I was in London at the time. I just want to move back up north. That was a really low point in my career.
So obviously, that's sad to hear that story, but everyone's got scars, I suppose, and that's yours.
Yeah.
When you reflect back, do you think, no, they definitely were rude, difficult, nasty, that was definitely a fair reaction? Or do you feel slightly differently now as you sit here, someone more experienced, more maybe self-confident, and can reflect on it differently? How do you feel about that now versus living raw in the moment?
So when I look back, I think she definitely was very rude. Like she was. I don't think I was overreacting there, but I think I could have just handled it so differently. I could have just cut the call short, just said, look, I'm obviously not the right person to speak to. Let me book you in with an account executive. Really sorry to have wasted your time if that's how you feel, and just ended it instead of trying to continue with the call, getting all upset, making everything worse.
Was the call recorded?
Yes, it was.
What happened to that recording?
I have no idea. It's probably, it's probably wiped now. It was so many years ago. But I remember going on to Gong afterwards and trying to see if there was a way I could delete the call. But then I was like, I'm just going to have to suck it up and accept that it's on there for life.
And no one picked it up for coaching or reviewing purposes, kind of just got away with it. Sounds harsh, but
I got away with it. Thank God. Yeah.
And I feel like I know the answer, because that sounds like quite a traumatic experience, right? I can imagine it must have felt really low to turn the camera off and whatnot. What's the reason you didn't ask someone like a manager for help with a difficult prospect at that point? Like, I've got the recording. Can you help me? I don't want this to happen again.
Because I was so embarrassed. I was mortified by the way I'd gotten really upset and I had to turn my camera off. I was like, this is ridiculous. I was so ashamed of the way that I'd responded. And I just thought, there's no way I can share this. That's just going to look so bad. What will they think of me?
I get that. It is hard. Was that the lowest point you've ever had?
Yeah, that's a memory that will stick with me, like a distinct moment. I think when I did SDR management, that was also quite tough. And I did really, really struggle with that because I'd made the move into that, which was quite a bold move, to leave just becoming an account executive. So in my head, I was like, I really need to make this work. And I really thought that I was ready to be an SDR manager because I've been a really good SDR. So I was like, oh, this will be easy. And it was so difficult. And I remember just feeling completely out my depth, thinking, what am I doing? Not feeling experienced enough, not feeling good enough. But in my head thinking, I cannot leave this role. I can't, what can I do? Where do I go from here? I can't move into an AE role. I can't go back into an SDR role because that's absolutely mortifying. I can't move to another company. And I was like, I'm just in this absolute rut of what do I do?
I want you, we definitely need to talk about this new role as the manager.
Mm-hmm.
Just before we do that, I want you to imagine I'm you after that call at G2, okay? So appreciate we don't quite look the same, but I want you to imagine I've just made that call to my mum, can't do it, I want to move home, and then eventually that call finishes. You now, with your experience, the journey you've been on, what would you say to me?
I'd say, don't worry about it. Don't take it personally. It's just one call out of thousands of calls you're going to do. Let it go. Don't let it get to you. What can we learn from that call? What could you have done differently?
And that is easier said than done, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because even now, you're talking about as an AE, struggling to disconnect from the outcome, feeling like the relationship's there, etc. So, yeah, it's one of those things that's the best advice to give. Yeah, why is it the hardest to follow?
I know. It really, really is. And that's the thing. It's so easy before I get on calls now to think it's just a call, it's going to be fine. But if I'm on a call and someone picks up their phone or someone looks disinterested, no matter what self-talk I've given myself before, it is so difficult.
So in that low moment, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being everything's brilliant, I'm loving life, 1 being I just want to go back to that garden and never have to do this again. How low were you?
I would say 1 at that moment.
What kept you going?
Well, I had no choice. You know, I had a flat in London that I had to pay for. I had a job. And also, I think, you know, once you've calmed down, just that realization of, okay, I'm not the first person this has happened to. I'm not going to be the last. This is not going to be my last ever difficult call either. This does happen. Put your big girl pants on and get on with it.
They'd be Bridget Jones pants. So who's like helping you out when you're having those tough times? And you know, imagine your sister's going to be someone you're going to say, but who is someone that you can go to that helps you through these difficult moments, this head trash, this imposter syndrome, these struggles? Who is it you go to?
So I would say my sister. However, she can be very direct. So she often doesn't really, I feel bad saying this, but we have had this conversation. Sometimes she's not the most empathetic. She'll be like, come on, Holly, you're in a really good job. You make good money. Stop whinging and get on with it. You know, she's very direct. And when you're feeling very down and low, that is not what you want to hear. You know, you need someone that can give you that comfort. So honestly, I would probably say initially it'll be someone like my mum who will just tell me everything will be fine and comfort me. And then I think once I've got over the initial stress of it all, then that's when I will be in a position to say, okay, right now I want feedback. And that would either be with, you know, my manager, or it would be, you know, on one of our sessions, bring in a call and, you know, being ready to, and I find it funny how sometimes you'll ask me at the start, you know, how honest can we be today? Because, you know, some days are harder than others. Some days, you know, you only want to be able to take a certain level of kind of constructive feedback. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
So there's probably a slight missing piece for the people listening here in that, yeah, we have like a coaching arrangement where I provided coaching to you on a number of occasions. So that's probably a missing piece for people. But yeah, we can definitely talk about that. Is your mum's background sales? Like, does she get it, or is it more comfort?
It's purely comfort. She doesn't understand it at all.
Right, okay.
Bless her.
Would she know what like an SDR is, or SAS, or an AE?
Well, she does now. She tries her best. She really does, but yeah.
Bless her. When you're having like the crap moments, confidence takes a knock, mindset, it can feel like a lonely place. How does this impact your performance and your day-to-day in the role?
I would say when I get on calls, it makes me really nervous, a little bit stressed. I don't ask, my discovery goes to shit. I don't know if I can swear on this.
Yeah, it's fine.
Because I just want to get off the call, because I think the prospect just wants to get off the call, because I'm like, they don't want to speak to me. I'm not good enough to be here. So I just need to get through this as quickly as possible, tell them, you know, exactly what they need to hear. And then I just need to get off the call. And obviously that is the complete wrong way to go into a call. And then I think outside of that, it just makes, you know, prospecting really difficult, because you get a lot of rejection, you get a lot of people ignoring you. And when your confidence is quite low, and, you know, all you want that could make you feel so much better is just someone to reply and say, oh, thank you for the voice note, or whatever it might be. And, you know, when you have a run of some, you know, cold responses or no responses, that can be really tough as well. And it just makes you not want to do it.
And let's just say a standard 5-day working week. Mm-hmm. How many days do you feel like that versus I'm on top of the world?
Honestly, depends. If you'd have asked me this question last week when I closed 2 deals, I would have told you I feel on top of the world. Everything's good now. I've got the hang of this. It's great. If you're asking me this question this week when I've had a couple of deals fall through, it can be really, really tough.
It feels like it's a constant emotional roller coaster for you, sales.
It really is.
What's the reason you're still in sales?
Good question. The reason is because I I know deep down that I have potential, and I know that if I just fight through the difficult times that are always going to come up, I know that I can be a really good AE. I know that I will be a really good AE. And even though I do lose sight of that quite often, I need to just keep going because, and also I want the, the financial freedom that sales can give to you. I work fully remotely. Like, that's amazing. I don't want to be in, an 8 till 6 where I have to be in an office and I'm doing the morning commute, and I want that freedom and that flexibility. And when you do get that deal, or you do build a really great relationship with a client, like I get such a good feeling from that. And that's how I know, when the good's good in sales, the good is so good.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. The highs are high, the lows are low.
Yeah.
And I think I know, and this is why I want to do this podcast, I know that everyone has the lows and the highs, and that everyone used to be crap at sales. Many still are crap at sales. But here's where I think this comes really interesting. To the outside world, you look incredibly successful, right? You're on LinkedIn, you've got that personal brand, you've got, 25,000 plus followers. Does it ever, in your head, play a part in what you think people's perception of you is and the reality of you?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I completely agree with you in that people that post regularly on LinkedIn have these big followings. You think, not that I have a massive following, but you always think, oh, they've got their lives together, they're all sorted and whatnot. And actually, and like I say, I'm not saying I'm doing terribly and it's all doom and gloom and all the rest of it. That's not the case at all. But I think you do have to take what you see with a pinch of salt. Like, you really, really do. And I think that with LinkedIn, I think that with all social media, everyone wants to show their highlights, their best bits, and I'm not going to do a LinkedIn post and make a video and do it half-heartedly or do it in a really nervous state. You're always going to show up and do your best. And that's why I think podcasts like this are so important, to show, like, look, what you see isn't always, the reality. And if you are struggling, that's completely fine, because so many people, especially now at the moment, so many people are struggling in sales.
Totally. And that's why it's great to have you on. And look, as we'll get into, I'm your coach at times. Like, we have one-to-one. I know you're doing really well. I've seen deals that you've closed. You've taught me through your pipeline. You are. But equally, you're having like loads of difficult moments, as is everybody. And I think that's kind of like what we want to get across. When people switch into this, they'll be feeling like you. They've had those moments, and it's like, it's great to see successful people, or that perception of, struggle as well. So talk to me about your time as a manager then. I know we are jumping back and forth, but people can keep up with us. You take that manager role. You'd have been quite young at that point, 24?
Yeah, I think I accepted the job on my birthday, or the day before my birthday. My 24th birthday, I think it was.
Tell me about that period. Tell me as much as you want to about that period as being a manager and what you learned.
So I think I was so excited about the role. I was really excited about the company. I was really excited about my team and being able to build out my team as well. That was great. But I think I wasn't ready for a manager role. And I think as an SDR, I had a very particular way of doing things. My social selling, my personal brand, that was my thing. And in my head, I was like, well, everyone can do that, which, yes, I'm not saying people can't build a personal brand. Like, of course you can. But I think that everyone has their own unique way that they like to work. Everyone has their own skill set, things that they're going to be better at. And, things like cold calling. I was not a confident cold caller. I didn't really cold call at G2, in all honesty. So then, going into a company and having to kind of encourage your team to cold call when you're thinking, well, I'm terrified of cold calling. I just felt, I didn't feel like I could, I didn't feel like I had a leg to stand on, really. And to be completely honest as well, I really missed being in a sales role myself. And I remember, because especially at the start, it really was kind of mainly, management and getting the team up and running and whatnot. And I wasn't really doing that much, SDRing myself. And I remember when I would do bits of it, I would really enjoy it. And it was kind of at that point I was thinking, oh, have I gone into this way too soon? I don't have any manager experience. This is a lot to take on. And actually, I kind of want to be an IC again.
So again, there's loads of good work there. I think one thing that I find really interesting that you said, because I hear this a lot, is asking your team to do something that either you don't want to, can't, or not confident in doing yourself.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that, really?
That's a good question. I mean, I would just try my best to feel motivated and excited by it. I remember for cold calling in particular, I remember I got some cold calling experts in to help the team, but also help me. I was there taking all the notes. So just getting like additional training and trying to, come around to it and start to feel more comfortable with it. But like I say, it was difficult. And I used to just feel a bit like I never wanted to be one of those managers that would be like, telling people to do a certain number of calls, but then like not actually being there on the front line yourself. Like I think that is important, especially as an SDR manager. And for something like calling, I definitely wasn't doing that because I was nervous too. And I think a big part of that as well is when you are a manager, you kind of, or I certainly felt like I couldn't fail. So I was nervous to make calls in front of the team and maybe get told to go away and then, not want to make another call. I was like, I don't want to show that to them. Like, that'll look really bad. What will they think of me? And I think it does all come back to that imposter syndrome piece of just not believing in myself that I could do it, and just not wanting to fail and look a fool in front of a team that you're meant to be leading and you're meant to be a good example to.
Do you think they noticed?
I don't know.
I can see how that can be difficult. Is it? No one likes cold calling. No, even those
Some people say they do.
No, but they're liars.
Yeah.
Like, even people that are really good at cold calling don't like cold calling. It goes against everything they've ever been told to do growing up, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't talk to strangers, don't interrupt, speak when spoken to, and then just that belief of like nuisance phone callers and that interruption and imposter syndrome and all of that stuff. But yeah, it must be tough. And then, as I say, you're an AE now at Dill. Talk to me about just your self-development then and what you are doing to unlock your potential, right? Like, I know that, as I say, it was a bit of a perfect storm, really. Am I right in thinking I was the first meeting you booked as an SDR at Dill? Is that right?
Yes, you were. You were.
I remember you saying, yeah. I remember you saying to me at the time. So, yeah, and then we obviously started speaking. My sales coach was pretty much in its infancy. We offered you a scholarship. You've had coaching from my sales coach for a year and a half. But let's not talk about that right now. I don't want to plug my sales coach specifically, but obviously a little bit. What do you do for self-development?
So in the job, it's things like having regular one-to-ones with my manager that aren't always going over calls, sometimes it will just be something that I need is just a bit of a check-in, and for him to say, my manager is great and he will say to me pretty much on every call, I believe in you, Holly, you just need to believe in yourself, which sounds a bit cringe when I say it out loud, but it does help, and that helps me develop in the sense of it makes me feel a little bit more confident each time we get off those one-to-ones and then I go onto a call. And then I think just all the kind of typical stuff that people probably have heard before, around watching on calls, watching, not only other people's in your company, but watching yours back as well. Something I hate doing, but that's obviously something that we do, that I prefer to do with someone because it somehow makes it less cringe than doing it on your own. Asking for feedback, unlike that girl at G2 that was crying and didn't want her calls to be seen, actually going, look, this wasn't a very good call. Can you actually help me? Because I think even though sometimes you can shy away from doing that, it does feel really good when you have got the feedback afterwards and you can action it.
Any books, podcasts in particular you've enjoyed or taken inspiration from?
No.
Not a reader, not a listener, just not your thing?
Just not my thing, no. If I read a book or I listen to a podcast, I want that to be completely non-sales related, I'll be honest. I don't want to be, people have told me about like 30 Minutes to President's Club and I would love to tell you that I've listened, but I'm not going to lie. I'm not a sales podcast girly.
Fair enough. So it's not really books or podcasts. That's not your thing, but it feels like you really try to utilize the time with your manager. You use conversation intelligence to listen back and review calls. Do you find yourself listening more to your own calls or someone else's calls?
Other people's calls.
And how do you pick whose calls you listen to?
I look at the top performers, and I also look at the a style that I feel I can relate to the most.
And what kind of style is that?
Well, maybe not the style I relate to in the sense of being friendly, warm, bubbly. I feel like that is very much my tone, as opposed to someone that's very direct. But there's this one AE, he's called Jay. He's amazing. And when he goes on calls, like, he does not pitch deal at all. He literally sells problems. You and him would have a field day together. He's just selling problems the whole time. And the prospects are literally like putty in his hands after the call. And I'm just like, I want to be like Jay when I grow up.
Does Jay know this, or is this going to be the first he hears of it?
He does, yeah. I message him all the time.
Okay. And then obviously, yeah, you get coaching through my sales coach. I'm your coach. We've never had a conversation about our coaching other than we just have the coaching sessions. Really be honest, right?
Yeah.
I know. So first of all, you asked me to be your coach.
Yeah.
Right. I'm very different to you, and you know that, right? So I suppose that's interesting. First of all, what's the reason you asked for me when you want the bubbly, the friendly person? I mean, I'm not bubbly at all in that sense. What was the reason you asked for me when I'm very different to you?
Because you are very direct. You won't bullshit. If something is bad, you will tell me. I mean, you won't say, Holly, this is terrible, but, you'll...
I'll soften it a little bit.
Yeah. And I do think I do need that, because ultimately the reason I'm having the coaching is because I want to get better. I want to be really, really, really good at this job. And so if I have someone that's a bit soft and a bit nicey, and we're not going to get anywhere. So even though sometimes I'm like, Jesus Christ, Mark, that was brutal, I'm also very grateful that you have, said what you've said, because ultimately it does help me and I do take it on board.
So that's obviously that's good to hear that it's helpful to take it on board. I think, yeah, as I say, we've never spoke about this. It's mad, really. And when we're having our coaching sessions, I think we learn maybe 3-4 sessions in that we need to find out where you are that day.
Yeah.
And I now start each coaching session with how direct you want me to be.
Yeah.
Now, here's something that we didn't speak about. I remember, we've had a session since, but the previous session, I think was like the back end of last year, I said, how direct do you want me to be? And you were like, go all the way. I think I was really direct. And I know at the end, you were not in a good place. And that was obviously never my intention.
Yeah.
But it turns out, because we spoke about it, turns out the feedback and coaching I gave you turned out to be correct.
Was bang on, yeah.
So, but you didn't book with me for a little while.
I didn't.
Talk to me about that.
So that situation was, for context, so I'd had a call. It was a kind of final stage call with a prospect. It was about, pricing and whatnot. And you'd basically said, look, I would have handled this very differently. And I was like, no, I'm convinced she's going to buy, she's going to move forward. And she didn't. And you basically predicted that. And I think maybe the reason I didn't book was because I probably felt a bit embarrassed, because I remember coming onto the call and thinking like, oh, that was a pretty good call. The feedback's going to be fine. And but yeah, what you told me was completely correct. But I think maybe the reason I didn't book was because, yeah, it was kind of a tail in between my legs, a bit embarrassed. You were right, it hasn't closed.
And I think I hear that from people before. They feel like they can't see their coach again because they haven't done what they said they would do.
Yeah.
They feel like they have got their tail between their legs because the coach was right in terms of. I remember, like you say, I predicted. I was like, this won't close, and here's the reasons why. And as I say, I was thinking, so what did happen with that? And, but obviously, I'm never going to chase you. It's got to be you wanting that next session. And we've had one since on video messages, didn't we?
Yeah.
Talk to me about, and I know there's a slightly different dynamic now because I'm the coach. Normally that wouldn't be the case. So try and separate that. But talk to me about the impact coaching has had on you and the trajectory of your career.
So, I mean, it's been really helpful. Otherwise, I wouldn't keep doing it. I think sometimes as, a rep, you don't always want to show your manager your really bad calls, or I don't know, sometimes if they ask you like, oh, like, why did you say that? Or why did you position it this way? Or sometimes the answer is literally, oh, God, I don't really know. I just kind of panicked. But you might not feel comfortable to say that. Which, to be fair, like, genuinely is not the case with my manager. Like, I can be very, very honest. But I think it's just also having that, like, fresh perspective from another pair of eyes. And I mean, I'm not going to lie, like, you are very good at what you do. And often with managers, you won't have like an hour. We have our sessions like monthly, right? But you won't have like an hour a week to go over one call and really delve into it. And so it's just having that time, that space to like really dig into something. And I think as well, almost that thing of like, okay, I'm going to see you in a month's time or however long it is. And wanting to come to that session, being like, okay, I action the feedback. This worked, this didn't. And, looking forward to that catch up as well.
It's good to hear the impact that's having. And I've talked for days about the impact coach had on me. And I've had that. I remember my first coaching session, like, I had a tear come down my eye. Like, it was really tough. I remember at the end, my coach said, we should do this again. I'm thinking, I fucking hope not.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so here's what we've covered in this podcast so far. You used to be climate sales. Mm-hmm. We've covered why you got into sales, the journey you've been on, the moments that have been difficult for you, but also where you're going and what you're doing to try and improve it. Let's talk about some other parts of sales in general. What's a valuable piece of advice you've been given in sales that you wished you got earlier?
So, not even I wish I'd kind of got earlier, but I think something that I wish was instilled in my mind and something I wish I could remember is remember it's just a job. And it's really not life or death. If you get on a call and it goes badly for whatever reason, it is not life or death. The world is not going to end. And that is really something that I think I definitely need to remember. And I think a lot of reps need to, because it is so easy to get into your head about, a call going wrong and, oh my God, I'm going to miss my target and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And it's just a job. It's not the end of the world.
Who's had the biggest influence on you in your sales career?
Probably my sister.
I feel like she gets a lot of good out of this interview.
She does. She always gets a plug on podcasts.
Except not splitting that commission. This is a fun one. What's one classic prospect habit or behaviour that frustrates you the most?
When prospects are really, really interested and there's a clear need, but then at the end they're like, yeah, so let's pick this up in 4 weeks. No, let's pick this up tomorrow. But yeah, that really annoys me.
Do you think sales is a profession to be proud of?
Abso-fucking-lutely. Yes, I think it's one of the, well, I'm going to say it's one of the hardest jobs out there. I know I'm going to probably get some, not that any doctors would listen to this, but people are going to be like, what are you on about? Like, there's people saving lives. But oh my God, I think it is very challenging and something to be proud of if you can get through it.
You've got a little nephew, haven't you?
I do.
If he said to you, Holly, I want to go into sales, SaaS sales, what would you say?
I'd say, don't do it. No, I'm joking. I'd be like, great, let's continue the family history.
As we get towards the end of the podcast, what advice would you give to anybody right now that's not fulfilling their potential, maybe just coasting in their sales role? What advice would you give to them?
So I think the first thing I would say is think about the reason why you're coasting. Get to the root cause of the problem. Is it number one because you are just not motivated and you don't want to do it? In which case, I think sales is a very hard career and I don't think it's one that you can just do for the sake of it. So I would say find something else, go into something different. Or if it's a case of, I really want to be here, but I'm just really struggling. Well, why are you struggling? Are you not getting the support? Is it the product? Are you just not passionate about it? Do you need to seek something like external coaching? What is the problem? And I think just be honest with, your managers and the people around you. I think it's very, very easy, especially at the start of your career, when you just want to make a good impression, so that every one-to-one you get on, when your manager's like, oh, how's it going? You're like, yeah, it's amazing. And they're like, oh, you've, maybe not booked as many meetings this week. Oh, yeah, well, and you're making excuses. No, just be completely honest. Work hard, but if you are struggling, be honest and get help.
If someone's just had the realization, I'm crap at sales, what should they do?
Understand why you're crap at it. Like, what are you struggling with? What are the areas? Sit down with your manager, get a coach, figure it out.
If you were to start your career again, let's skip the shot part, but at G2, you're going to start that career again, what would you do differently?
I would not be so impulsive and throw my toys out the pram when I wasn't getting something, i.e. with the account exec role that I moved into, sticking it out. Of course it's going to be hard. It's progression, it's a new role, it's a promotion, but suck it up, give it time. I think time's the best healer, as cliche as it is to say, and keep going.
And I think on that we didn't get to this actually. There will be loads of SDRs that follow you that will listen to this, all of which are looking up at the next role as an AE, all of which thinking I want to be an SDR team leader or an SDR manager. They're not ready for it. What would you say to them people that are listening that have been in the role for 6 months, 12 months, maybe even 18 months, and they're desperately just constantly looking at their next role, but they're not ready for it? What would you say to those people?
I would say, before you jump into the role officially, do the role in your current role. So what I mean by that is, if you're an SDR and you really want to be an AE, but your company don't think you're ready or whatever it might be, do 1 day a week, 2 days a week as an AE. Start to actually try to close deals, build the proposal decks for your AE, like actually do the job. Because I think this is advice that is given a lot of the time, and a lot of SDRs don't do it because they probably know that they're actually not ready, and really they don't know how to build a proposal deck. Well, guess what? When you're on the front line, when you're in that role, it's you. You're the one that the prospect is going to come to saying, where's that deck? Or why is there this error on this deck? You've got no AE to hide behind. So I would just say start now, so that when you do move into the role, it's not a massive shock.
Great advice. Last question. I want you to think about who should be a guest on the I Used to Be Crap at Sales podcast. So have a little think about someone who you'd love to hear be as open and vulnerable as you on the podcast. And then when you know who that person is, I want you to look at your camera and invite that person to come on and tell them why they should come on.
Harry Monkhouse, I think that you should come on the I Used to Be Crap at Sales podcast. The reason being, you have had a super successful career starting out as an SDR, moving into an AE role, and you've now taken on a new role and new venture. So would love to hear about your journey and what you've learned along the way.
Fantastic. Holly, we will trim that up. We'll send that to Harry. And that brings us to the end of the episode. Holly, I just want to start by saying thank you for being so open, so honest and vulnerable today and sharing your experiences. I want to double down on what I said earlier on in the podcast. I'm really lucky I get to be your coach. So when we work together in our one-to-ones, I listen to your cold calls, I've read your emails, I've watched your discovery calls, I watch your demos, and you are so talented and amazing at what you do, but that's not what this podcast is all about. And I know that you've totally embraced that. We've spent the time talking about how you used to be, like everybody else, crap at sales, and you've just been remarkably honest and shown that side that people wouldn't want to talk about. So I want to thank you for that, but really double down on that, you are really talented and it's great to be a coach and watch you grow in every session. Thanks for coming on.